Imagine for a moment, you have just had the best day of your life. Everything just went right for you today. You had a wonderful morning, a whole hearty breakfast, and an active yet calm evening. You got a big promotion, you've taken a major step in your life, and you've decided, today is the day you're going to take a bigger one. You're going to ask out that person you have liked for so long now. You see them there in the distance. You muster up the courage and begin to walk over to them. But then suddenly, slick. A sudden sharp pain. It's numbing. It's cold. Oh, so cold. You look down and then click. It's morning again, and you have no recollection, yet your brilliant day begins again. What I just described was the daily routine of a type of undead that is commonly encountered, an incorporeal being known simply as a ghost. The example I just gave was that of a young man who was accidentally murdered by a simple pickpocket. The pickpocket just wanted his coin, but he ran in too quickly and his blade simply slipped. But the young man was unwilling to let go. That day was perfect, and he needed it to be the right day. There was no way he was going to accept that this is how it ends, on today of all days. And so he just didn't accept it. See, a ghost is made by pure emotion and unwillingness to let go. In the example of the boy, it was actually his pure joy of that day that was keeping him bound to the mortal world. It can be any emotion that causes this effect too, be it anger, fear, sadness, perhaps jealousy, or even something specific and bizarre you wouldn't expect. A ghost can come back via their pure disgust at how they died. Regardless of the emotion, the only other thing that is needed is for there to be some form of unfinished business. The ghost needs something else, something they needed to do before they died, and for whatever reason, they failed to do it. Now, the ghost is the simplest form of incorporeal undead, meaning it has no physical form that you can touch, at least not one without some form of magic, or they let you do so. Now, there are many types of incorporeal undead. Some of them get very confusing and bizarrely specific in their creation, so I will leave all of them for their own days, for they genuinely deserve them. Just now, know that the ghost is very simple when compared to other incorporeal undead. Now, with that being said, there isn't actually a way you can really create a ghost. While you can recreate the steps that you make one, which would make you horrifically evil, so don't do that, but you have absolutely no way of controlling it or really knowing if you've actually succeeded, and it would almost certainly want you dead if it even knew that it was a ghost to begin with. Right, I should probably get into that. See, quite a lot of ghosts, almost half of them I would estimate, don't actually know they are ghosts, or just yet to realize it. Many of them will repeat the same events over and over again, and it can be really hard to actually snap them out of this if they've been going through it for a long time. What makes it more confusing is that they see the world differently than us. In fact, they might not be able to see us at all. They might be seeing their final day over and over again as it unfolded. I need to go on a quick side tangent for you to understand how this works, real quick, so bear with me. See, there are different planes of reality you might have heard of, such as the Shadowfell or the Feywild, two different but parallel worlds to our own. Now, there are some places where these converge, where the walls are thin. You might know these places as portals or gateways or perhaps slightly mystical areas, while there is another one known as the ethereal plane. This is a massive oversimplification, but the ethereal plane sort of runs through our own. When you are in there, you can see all of our reality, but from ours, you can't see any of theirs unless the walls are very thin. This is actually how some invisibility spells and items work. It technically sends you to another plane of reality, just one that's sort of within our own, in a way. Look, it's very complicated, but why this matters is because ghosts are actually in there. Well, kind of. Like I said, it's very confusing, but if you suspect a ghost is present and you cannot see them, there are two ways to find them, usually to see invisible things, or to just see into the ethereal plane. In fact, you can even touch them if you enter it in any way. You can't do this, by the way, if you use those invisibility spells. Well, look, that would take me far too long to explain why, just accept that's how that works. But back to the topic at hand, I'm now going to walk through the steps to identify and hopefully help free a ghost, if not deal with it. Out of all the incorporeal undead, they are perhaps the easiest to identify, so you should always try and rule out if it's a ghost first. So, for a start, their appearance. They should naturally resemble what they look like in life, and perhaps might show how they died. Well, it might not be so clear, but if they were, say, decapitated, you're gonna see very quickly how they died. Oh, and as an extra aside, anything can become a ghost, not just humanoids. I've even seen animals become ghosts, but, well, I'll talk more about that later. Now then, if you're suspecting it's a ghost at this point, you would then need to identify the emotion that's keeping it here. And since this can go on a wide spectrum, it's actually going to be really hard to pin down its exact one. Near impossible, I would say. But that's not why I view this as a step. In truth, you don't need to know the exact emotion, you just need to know if they are actually savable. See, there are many emotions they can take, but if it's something like joy or love or even sadness, it's quite possible you are able to help them, as there's something else that's, shall I say, positive that's keeping them here. But if it's emotion like hate or anger, something incredibly negative, it's going to be near impossible to help them, and they might just attack you at first sight. If they do this, you are probably impossibly going to help them, so attacking them's the best bet. But with that being said, there is a very specific scenario you need to be careful. It's the emotion of fear. You need to be very, very delicate in how you handle the emotion of fear, because they can vary massively, to the point where both the kindest and most sincere ghosts are powered by this emotion. But so too are the most cruel, vindictive, and downright evil ones. The worst part is that they know this, and some are even going to fake being the other kind, perhaps to trick you and run away, or to brutalize you horribly. They tend to be the most powerful ones as well, so if they are powered by fear, it really is the worst case scenario, for a normal ghost anyway. Now, the way you actually help a ghost is quite simple. There are two ways to achieve it, and both of which require you to identify what their unfinished business was. And this is actually quite difficult, much more than you'd expect, because not all ghosts remember what that is, or even who they are. You've got to remember, these are beings brought here by pure emotion. The actual person might not truly be there anymore, it's just the emotional state that survives. But once you know what that is, you can either fulfill their unfinished business, or help them let it go. Which you should do, actually just depends on what the task is. If someone became a ghost, for example, because he failed to deliver a letter, then you should probably just deliver that letter for him. But if they wanted revenge, and by doing so they wanted to kill, say, an entire dynasty, maybe just talk them out of it. But I would also be amiss if I didn't talk about some pseudo-loopholes for helping ghosts. For an example, say two clans have been warring at each other over generations to the point where ghosts are being made, and the origins has been completely forgotten. They might want the end of the war, and they think it's by the destruction of the other clan. But if you end the conflict peacefully instead and have them settle this grudge, that might just free them as well. It's one of those things where you can't be certain if it'll work, but if it's the peacefuler option, well, you might as well try it. So, those are the ways you can actually help ghosts, but that's not always possible, I'm afraid, and so I need to talk about when you have to deal with them. This can be quite difficult because they are absolutely terrifying to face in actual combat. Let me just go over some of their abilities for a moment. You see, they partly rest within the ethereal plane and our own, as I talked about before, and so they are freely able to sort of phase between them as they wish. So even if you're able to step into, they can just step right out just as quickly. And they can also see everything that goes on in both realms if they are focusing. So during a combat situation, it's going to be impossible to surprise them once the fight has actually started. If you want to do that, do it beforehand. Did I also mention that they can just sort of phase through anything, regardless of which plane they're on? See, this is something where their in-betweenness comes in as a nature. See, technically, they are not in either of them, and this allows them to quickly dart through almost anything. The caveat being, they have to keep moving. If they stop and stay still, the different parts of them are going to be torn apart and damaged, as if the two planes are starting to realize you shouldn't be here, and so are pushing parts of them away. So they can't hide in the walls, but they can just go between them and hide in the other room, so the distinction's not really that noticeable unless you have someone in every room. The very touch of a ghost's hand can induce death should they wish it, hurting you with pure necrotic energy, destroying and killing the very cells of your body. This is actually something they can do entirely voluntary, meaning they have complete control over it. The reason I mention that is because some ghosts will lie. They secretly wish to kill you and trick you. Whoops, I didn't mean to touch you, or I'm sorry, I have no control. That is a lie. They are pretending they have no control, as to slowly kill someone that trusts them. And all of this is without their most devastating abilities, for they have two that even the most skilled adventurers are afraid to face. Their first is simply their fear, magically induced fear, obviously, but something you can resist, and I would argue you need to resist, for running in terror from this effect is not the worst part. What it actually does to you is why people are afraid of it. If you let this fear strike at your very being, your body will start to age rapidly, in a matter of mere moments, losing just under 50 years of your life. Now, to an elf, or even a dwarf, that might not be that bad, but to say, a human like myself, that's absolutely mortifying, since that would be half my life. Just because I saw a spooky floating skeleton, I'm now going to die. It's terrifying to think of. Fortunately, you can fix this effect, but only by powerful holy magic, and it needs to be within the same day, or else this effect becomes permanent. So unless you have a powerful holy figure with you, you better be within a stone's throw of a major city, or else you're just going to lose half your life. Now, fortunately, they can only do this once on each person. Once the fear over the situation has faded, you should be okay, but I would advise haste if the aging has affected anyone. And their last ability is that they can possess people. A ghost can jump into a person and sort of hijack their body. They will have complete control over that person's function and form, but they will have no sway over their mind. The person inside can still see everything that the ghost is making them do, and they have no way of stopping it once they're inside them. There are only two ways to stop this possession once they are being controlled, and that is with someone else casting warding magic, both holy and arcane, and just knocking that person unconscious, which does allow the ghost to just try again on another person, even with the ward on that person, unless you've done it on a group. There's no time limit on this as well, by the way. They can keep control for as long as that person is awake. You're also going to find that ghosts are just very hard to kill, no surprise there. If you have no magical capability, or not wielding a magical weapon, your best option is to just run as fast as you can, because without magic, there's just no way of you hurting them. Even if you do, or have an enchanted weapon, you'll find that your attacks don't quite land the same way, as if you're hitting water, or swinging within water, rather than on dry land. You're still hurting them, by the way, just nowhere near as much. But if you do manage to, I was going to say kill the ghost, but that's not quite right. If you set it free and let the spirit go on, it will be judged like everyone else's will. The block that was keeping them there is lifted, so to speak. But I imagine the judges of whatever is overseeing that sort of thing They're quite harsh on ghosts, as they are with most undead. Sadly, even some that did nothing wrong, but that's gonna have to be a topic for another day. I've had many encounters with ghosts now. They're surprisingly common, and while there are many different stories with morals that I could tell, there's one that always touches my heart. That's the one I'd like to share. One time I was travelling in an old abandoned town. See, the locals nearby said it was haunted by a horrific monster, and, well, knowing me, I just had to check it out. When I arrived at the damn place, I felt its cold air. There was a dark aura here, a presence, and I heard a dark, sinister growl lurking in the shadows. I prepared a spell, but what stepped forth was an ethereal blue dog. The dog was clearly a ghost, and a tiny little thing that was more afraid of me than I was of it. I was hesitant at first because I thought fear was its emotion, but after some time I learned that it was not here out of a sense of fear, but one of loyalty. See, his owner promised that when they came back they would go for a walk together, but he clearly didn't come back. The man was a soldier after all, and he knew the risk. But this little dog had been waiting for all this time, even after not only his own death, but the death of his town. I had to help the little guy, and so I cast a myriad of spells to both learn who this person was, and to bring their spirit back for just a moment. The second that the old owner stepped forth from the ether, the look on that little dog's face was worth all the several days of work it took me to cast those spells. But both of them stepped off into the next life, reunited finally. I love that little dog, and I'm glad I could help it. See, that's the thing about ghosts. There's always a tragedy behind them. They're scared or confused. They don't quite know what's going on, and it makes you want to help them. There's even quite a few that don't deserve it. You know they don't deserve it. And yet they're not doing this out of some horrid justification of violence. At least very few of them are. Most of them, even if you have to resort to combat, you're doing a service when you free them. So please, help any ghost you can in whatever way is needed. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next time, fellow traveller, have a good day.